What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. My name is Miko, joined once again by my guy Morgan Cannon, and this is your go-to place for all things Lions related. That includes news, updates, analysis, a whole lot more. And obviously today, in this video, we're going to be breaking down day 6 and day 7 of Lions training camp. A lot of big storylines coming out from camp so far. But like I have said in every last one of our training camp videos, if you want that additional insight into training camp, especially if you don't want to wait until Monday to hear about Saturday's practice, I highly suggest that you guys check out Pride of Detroit Direct. That is linked in our description. It is a yearly subscription that we run over at Pride of Detroit. It's $50 for the year. It gets you all of this bonus content that we have, both written and video content. But specifically when it comes to training camp, you guys get immediate access to a podcast or a video cast that Jeremy and Eric do at the end of training camp practice, where they run through all the notes in their notebook that they've been taking while at practice, who stood out, just a little bit more like insight into how certain drills were ran, who really stood out in those drills, and things that they noticed that maybe you don't get to pick up in a video like this, or even in some of the written content that's over on the website. So if you are looking for that additional insight into training camp, I've been saying it, since training camp has started, I highly, highly suggest you guys check out Pride Detroit Direct. It's well worth it. $50 for the year, not all that bad. It's roughly $4.50, $4.50 probably for the year. So again, not a terrible expense. But with that said, for those that are, much more inclined to just kind of focus on the free content that we have here on YouTube, Morgan and I got you in terms of some of the biggest things to kind of stand out from practice. Now, Morgan, from what I remember, you did go to Saturday's practice, which was the first practice where fans got to be in attendance for training camp.
Yeah, it's always like the back together Saturday. They have it for season ticket holders only. Still always a packed house, man. That's one thing. I love Allen Park, love the facility. But one thing we are lacking a little bit is just more room, because if, like, at this point, they could accommodate 15,000 fans, because I know 15,000 would want to go if there were room. But still a really cool experience. The Lions do a good job. They got food and drinks set up if you've never been to training camp. Plenty of seating with cover. Back in the day, it wasn't no cover. You were just out there cooking. I remember that back in the day for sure, but they've definitely made it a little bit more of an easy experience now. I was actually over in the corner standing with my wife and daughter and mother-in-law, but I was still able to see a good bit of action, even though they were practicing on that far field. So yeah, cool experience. They had another practice. They had off Sunday. Another practice on Monday, which it was a hot one today, folks. If you're in the Metro Detroit area, then it's storming now, but it was hot earlier, Miko, like 92 degrees at 10 a.m. hot, right?
Yeah, and I think typically what we see in those types of practices, even if it is a padded practice, which I believe the Lions were in pads today, as well as on Saturday, like that's where you're going to see a lot of rotation. You also may see a couple guys that may not practice if they're dealing with certain things, just because they don't want, the elements to kind of be another limiting factor in a player, being able to have quality practice. Speaking of which, Kirby Joseph hasn't been at practice the last 2 practices that they've had. We don't have any type of report yet on like what he might be dealing with. Wasn't seen at practice on Saturday, was seen at practice today. And based off of the reports coming out from Jeremy and Eric, he just seemed to have like a compression sleeve on his leg. So more than likely, Morgan, if we're going to speculate, because obviously we're not doctors, probably just something minor that he's probably dealing with. But the Lions obviously need Kirby Joseph come the regular season, so they're not going to bother pushing him too hard going into week 2 of training camp.
Yeah, they play this week in the Hall of Fame game, but no starters really, outside of maybe a few rookies, are going to be playing in that game. Everyone's going to be over there in the little Lions jumpsuits, eating hot dogs and sunflower seeds. They love that. I don't know why. It's such a fun atmosphere. I remember those days too. But yeah, in this situation, they're probably just playing it safe again. It's an all-pro safety, means a lot to their championship aspirations this year. So, and the fact that the word is that he didn't want to talk to media, but then he went over and did a spot with NFL Network, and he wouldn't be talking to the media if anything serious were going on. So I wouldn't sweat that too much, just if we're giving our 2 cents, right, Miko?
Yeah, I mean, I think even what we've seen from the last couple practices, I think even on Saturday's practice, like, Ennis Rakestraw Jr. was starting to get out there. We were starting to see a couple of guys get back on the field that have been previously held out, and that were dealing with things. So this may just be a precaution of like, hey, if it's bothering you a little bit, let's be safe. like you said, we have a preseason game on Thursday. We're not going to probably run a ton with you in that regard anyway. Obviously, today the Lions ran more situational and red zone things, so it would have probably been interesting to see how Kirby matched up in some of those situations. But those are also like highly competitive areas of the field. You don't want to risk him tweaking something in week 2 of training camp.
Yeah, important to remember, folks, still July. And contrary to popular belief, or not popular belief, but maybe belief outside of Detroit or the Lions fan base, people think Dan Campbell's this meathead football guy. And he's definitely a football guy, but they're
Mm-hmm.
very, from an injury standpoint, man, they're ultra conservative, especially as it pertains to like soft tissue stuff. If it is a strain or a tweak of any kind, they're going to always err on the side of caution, like Miko said, especially this early. So, yeah. And Amik was in the same boat. They had him held out, but he talked to the media, if I'm not mistaken, after practice Saturday for quite a while. Amik's really good with
Yep.
the media, man. I really like Amik Robertson. Big fan. Can't wait to see him ball this year. So, yeah, it's neither of them I would get really worked up about. And, yeah, just important to remember that we still got quite a ways to go until September 7th.
Yeah, absolutely. Going into or getting into both, Saturday and today's practice, I think it's kind of like a tale of two different types of practices. I think when you look at from everything that came out, in regards to Saturday's practice, it was a lot of focus on a lot of like, offensive line, D line, O line type of matchups and things like that. And the D line is really starting to kind of come into their own. Obviously, having Hutchback is a big factor in that, and being able to see, once again him returning to form, but also like the type of impact that seems to have, or the type of domino effect that seems to have on everyone else along that defensive line. Marcus Davenport has been quietly having like a really good camp, and I think that's something that a lot of fans went into this season like having him re-sign. I think a lot of fans were probably like 50-50 on it, and I'm probably being generous by saying 50-50, because obviously, Marcus Davenport has dealt with his injuries and things of that nature. But Morgan, you and I know better than probably a lot of other people. Like when he's right, he is still a dominant like force when it comes down to both defending the run and getting after the quarterback.
Yeah, and he's an impact player. I think Brad Holmes talked about it on that Sirius XM radio interview last week, but he is like a really perfect complement. Like if he can stay on the field, man, he is almost a perfect complement to what
Mm-hmm.
Hutchinson's bringing on the other side. And I love that your point that you made about Hutchinson, Miko, because he's one of those players at this point, man. And the Lions have quite a few of them on both on defense and offense, but he's a force multiplier, like almost probably to the point like how Panay is on the offensive line, because he's beating the snot out of people, man. I keep hearing about, and I saw a couple of them, but boy, oh boy, when they got him over there over Dan Skipper, that's barbecue chicken every,
Yep.
my good Lord. And then you're not getting on Skipper for that. It's just like, what is he going to do? But it's bad. It's a clean win, bro.
And I think, like I said, like that should be reassuring news to fans, because if Hutch is doing that on his side, whether it's against Panay or against Dan Skipper, and then you're able to rotate in or have Marcus Davenport on the other side, putting in just as good of work, and they're both kind of like almost having these races to the quarterback or races to the backfield, or some of the things that I was hearing about Marcus Davenport, really specifically in the run game, which is really where the Lions are really going to, I think, see his benefit, is like him setting edges and forcing running backs to bounce out and allowing your linebackers to clean up things in the backfield and things like that. That's where things are really going to, I think, look up for this defense and really make Kelvin Shepard's job easy. But on top of that, I mean, even DJ Reader's out here, having a really good camp, and I think people kind of have started to forget about DJ Reader. Whether that's because the Lions drafted Tyleik Williams and a lot of focus is on Tyleik Williams, or a lot of people are just waiting for Aleem to get back. DJ Reader was a big signing a year ago, Morgan, and I think he's still someone that the Lions are going to lean on heavily, especially on those early down situations.
Yeah, don't sleep on DJ Reader, man. That's one of my favorite players to watch on film. I love the trenches. If y'all are new to the channel, when we get into film breakdowns, like I get pretty giddy over the trenches. And DJ Reader's either one of the best, if not the best, zero tech or one tech, in the league in terms of just playing the nose
Mm-hmm.
and occupying. And he can collapse the pocket too. Don't make like he's an athlete, like ball player, like was a crazy baseball player from as I understand it. So he's an athlete, and in my opinion, bro, like they're gonna roll with these big, because that's exactly like Miko said. They like their big personnel to where they can bully people up front, so their linebackers can fill lanes and make plays. That's how the defense is that's how it's drawn up. So in my opinion, like we're going to see on those early downs, like an interior that looks like DJ Reader at the nose, and then Tyleek at the 3 tech, and that's a whole lot of man on the interior, on the interior, bro. So, but that's what we want, right? That's get them to get, you earn the right to rush the passer, and if you take care of business on those first and second downs, that's when you can unleash 97 and get a little creative with these blitz packages on third down, right?
Absolutely. And speaking of Tyleek Williams, someone who's had, I think, a fairly good camp by all accounts, right? Like nothing flashy, nothing that's like overly, over the top in the sense of like what we're probably seeing from Aidan, or what we're seeing, probably even seeing from Marcus Davenport or DJ Reader. But Tyleek Williams is still, he's picking his spots, he's winning his certain matchups here and there, maybe having some really good battles with Tate Ratledge as well throughout camp. But another guy that I've been excited to hear about is Ahmed Hassani. And apparently on Saturday's practice, there was a good amount of Ahmed really just going out there again, very much of a roller coaster experience with him, right? There's some highs, there's some lows, but I think that's exactly what fans should expect from him again at this early point in his career, that you're going to see these moments where he's going to flash, and you're going to see that high motor, you're going to see that ability to learn and adapt. But at the same time, like you're going to see these areas where like, oh yeah, he's definitely has to clean that up as well.
Yeah, and it's important to remember he's only started playing the game not that long ago, and he has all the tools, all the traits you would want, but he's definitely learning, some of the stuff that like Hutchinson and them have been known, right? Like they're, Ahmed's getting the basics down, and that's fine because that's what you have to do. You have to build that foundation. And I don't know about you, Miko, but I'm so excited to watch him. He's probably going to be one we'll end up doing a film study on for the Hall of Fame game, because I assume he's going to get a boatload of snaps, because for him, every rep is so important. If he can be a sponge and just make the most of every rep he gets, whether it's in practice or in preseason games, he could be a player that could be on the active roster come, the regular season. He's just got to be able to digest. It's a lot for going from Boise State, whatever they were running there, I'm sure, to what Kelvin Shepard's running in Detroit, right, Miko?
Yeah. But I think one thing that we can probably safely assume about Kelvin Shepard is that like he seems to see the talent in Ahmed, and he's going to give him every opportunity to tap into that, right? And I think like even reading Eric's observation from Saturday, like having him run the gauntlet of so many different reps just back to back to back, to the point where like by the time like they're done, like Ahmed's gassed, but he's probably one of the few players on this roster that has that type of like deep gas tank to where he can put in that kind of work, and it's all to just help him get better in the long run.
I mean, yeah, he had talked about if he wasn't playing football, he'd be doing like the CrossFit games.
Yeah.
You keep that. Some of my boys in the military were really into CrossFit back in the day, and even when I was really fit, I'm like, I ain't doing that. No. I'm lifting weights, I'm doing it for fun. Yeah.
I would say that takes a different type of endurance and mental fortitude to be able to do that type of stuff. Speaking of which, so one thing that we haven't talked a lot about this offseason is the wide receiver group. And I think that's primarily because like you and I have talked about, like that group feels pretty solidified, right? You know it's Amon-Ra St. Brown, it's Jameson Williams, Khalif Raymond, Tim Patrick, like those guys are pretty much solidified. Isaac Tesla is obviously going to be in there, be it just because of the nature of him being drafted fairly high, and he's making his fair share of plays. But the battle at the back end of the wide receiver group is starting to heat up, and it's kind of interesting to see that a lot of these UDFAs, Morgan, are apparently like starting to kind of, make splashy plays here and there, as well as Dominic Lovett, who was a 7th round pick as well.
Yeah, and I really like Lovett. He can be a ace special teamer, so that's going to weigh heavily into whether he ends up making the 53 or not. But then Jackson Meeks, the UDFA, who I just remembered is Zadarius Smith's nephew. So that's pretty interesting. But he made a heck of a play Saturday that I saw downfield, contested catch. Jameson Williams was the first down there, like so hype. So that was fun to watch. But yeah, it's a deep room, man. And it's something I thought about the other day. Like the DBs and the receivers are so good for this team. Like it's always been about the trenches, and it continues. Like, the Lions offensive line and defensive line are both, poised to be top end units too in 2025. The DBs, like you got all pro caliber players, plural, on both sides of the ball when you factor in Laporta and JMO and Jameer and all the, just the skill on skill defense and offense. It's been fun. It was fun to watch, and it's been fun to read about because that's must see TV.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of the secondary being just as talented, I think that's a good transition over into today's practice because today was very much focused on red zone. And red zone is one of those areas where I think like as you can get good one-on-one work anywhere on the field, right? Like any type of matchup between like these DBs and these receivers, you're more than likely to get a good matchup. But red zone specifically is like where things can get like you have such a small area to work with that those battles become very, very intense. And we saw, some really good things come out of this practice today. I think one other one that it's not that we don't want to talk about him, but I think it's almost just like chalked up like, yeah, we know he's doing good things. Brian Branch apparently stood out very well in these red zone drills. And I think it's one of those things where, you know, I think people forget how good he is as a coverage safety, right? Like not just like, covering zone or just blitzing or, being a sure tackler. Like you get him in a good one-on-one type of situation. And Brian Branch is going to compete at the highest level and he's probably going to win more matchups than he loses, right?
He's just such a multi-talented player. Like he can play zone elite. Like he's so good at it. We saw some of the examples last year where he just broke off and he's like, "No, I'm going to make this play, even though I'm in cover two. I'm going to bail and pick this thing off." So you see him do that. He's excellent around the line of scrimmage. Man, plays like a linebacker. Comes downhill with bad intentions, and then like you said, Miko, I don't know who it was, but someone and it was like a respectable analyst, but they're like something about BB's coverage and it, improving out of Bama. I'm like, what? He was locked down at Bama. He was such a special player, and like he just really BB's a first round player, but the NFL thought too much about it because he ran a slow 40 in Indianapolis, man. So it's just another one of those where you're like, we should probably just look at the tape. And I know Brad Holmes did. I know me and you were specifically when they were doing all that trade back stuff. I'm like, don't get too cute. Get this man, please don't get too cute. And we've been lucky, man, because he's another. I try to be objective. If y'all have been around this channel for a while, I try to be objective. Brian Branch is legit like an all-pro caliber player this year, depending on how things shake out, which is crazy because you just had a first-team all-pro in Kirby Joseph.
That's where like it stands for me as well. Like I will continue to beat this drum and I will continue to like, puff my chest out about this one. I had the line, I would have taken Brian Branch at 6 that year. That's how highly I thought of Brian Branch when he was being drafted because he was just that multifaceted. And to see him continuing to do it again, going into what is this year 3 for him into the NFL, and it's like he's already being seen as one of the best safeties in the NFL. He's going out there in a practice like this in a red zone drill, and you're matching up against Jameson Williams, you're matching up against Amon-Ra St. Brown, you're matching up against Khalif, which if you've ever checked out any training camp recap or observation, Khalif is a nightmare to deal with in one-on-one situations.
Yeah,
and BB's handling all three, right? Like he's absolutely stepping up to the plate and showing that, like you said, he's if he's not already there, like I think he's going into this season very much capable of being named an all-pro at the end of the year. And I think that's probably something that's high on his list. After seeing Kirby do it last year, I think we're going to see even more of Brian Branch this upcoming season.
Yeah. And there's going to be packages where he's down in the nickel, depending on what they're doing that week, because he's so good in the slot too, which is a difficult place to guard elite receivers. So just an excellent chess piece for Kelvin Shepherd to deploy. And I'm so high on him going into year 3 because things should just be slowing. Things are probably pretty slow for him coming out of, Bama. Man started for Nick Saban as a freshman. If y'all are, learning more about BB's lore, if you will. Mm-hmm. So yeah, started for Nick Saban as a 17-year-old, which is insane, folks. So the man's basically a doctor, got his doctorate. To be honest with you,
it probably right. When it comes down to playing DB, like you're probably going to be hard pressed to find a guy that's more heady and more aware than Brian Branch is at this point in his career. We've talked about other members of the secondary. We've talked about Terrion, before, and how he seems to be definitely on an upward trend, and he seems to be playing at a really high level. DJ Reed is currently still sitting out some practices. Again, not sure exactly what he's dealing with. But this has allowed some opportunity for the Lions to check out some more of their depth. And one of the guys I've been excited and I've been trying to contain my excitement about him ever since the Lions signed him is Rock Ya-Sin. I was a huge Rock Ya-Sin fan when he was coming out in his draft year. And I just thought he would have fit Detroit back then. took a little bit of time for him to get here, but like he's starting to really show that veteran savviness, and in practice like today where he's getting more and more opportunities to go out there and roll with the first and second team, like really showing off his physicality, really showing off his ability to kind of just understand and think the game at a higher level than some of these younger players. What do you think about Rockison's like possibility of making this roster? Because I think at the beginning of the offseason, he seemed more like a far shot. And I think as things are kind of trending on, like me personally, I think he's inching that much closer to becoming more of a quote unquote lock to make this roster.
I would like to keep him in just because y'all know how much attrition typically, I'll knock on wood, but a secondary goes through in the course of a season. They get hurt a lot. It's a taxing position. Hopefully it doesn't happen this year to the Lions, but chances are it will. And Rocky Sin is a pro. Now, he's got a lot of experience under his belt, and you could do a lot worse, having to start Rocky Sin a couple weeks while your starter recovers and gets back on the field. I hope he ends up making the team. I'm sure he's a good influence along with DJ Reed for the likes of Terrion and Ennis Rakestraw and some of these younger cats. So I hope he ends up making the team. I think I had him in. I also haven't been sleeping much. I have a newborn, but
I was gonna say I went back and forth. Like, so if you guys haven't checked out like our Bubble Watch article on the Pride Detroit website, like we go through every player and we get to decide like, hey, do we think this player is in? Do we think this player is out? And I think I had him out in favor of Khalil Dorsey. But Morgan, if he continues to practice this way and if Khalil Dorsey continues to sit out, one of two things is going to happen, right? Either I'm going to probably flip the two, where I'm going to have Rocky Sin in and Khalil Dorsey out, or I'm probably going to have to make a really tough decision somewhere else, because this past week was tough in terms of trying to figure out like who I thought actually has a real legitimate chance of making this roster. And it's because a lot of guys are starting to like really pop off and really shine in a good way. Again, it's 1 week of training camp, but you start stacking up 2 solid weeks, you really start kind of, pushing the needle for yourself as a viable option to make this roster.
Yeah, and I love that you said that too, because Dan Campbell said that before the first padded practice Saturday. He's like, this is when the real evaluation begins, essentially. So yeah, I do think, the roster's so competitive at this point, man, and so deep. And it's fun to like think about some of these camp battles, because there's some good players like Dominic Lovett. Like, make no mistake, some of these guys, if they don't end up making the roster, they're going to be signed elsewhere. I promise you that. Like several of them, because guys like Anthony Pittman, players of that nature, like, they've got tape. They've done it before. They're viable special teamers. To Miko's points, it's going to be competitive, and there's just with the roster so set, going into the season, it's not like there's a whole bunch of spots up for grabs. So something to keep in mind, and so much of it's going to boil down to Dave Phipps' room and special teams, right, Miko? Just being able to contribute there, because that might end up. Khalil Dorsey is an ace gunner, like a really, really good gunner in this league. So that's something to keep an eye on too. Can someone supplant that production as a gunner if Rocky Sin does indeed take his spot?
And it's something that, like, again, it's really something to keep an eye on going throughout camp, because I think in years past, like, we used to always say that, right? Like, if this roster is getting more talented, you're going to have to make a mark on special teams if you want to make this team. There's so many guys on this roster now, though, that are good special teamers, where it's like that's no longer a shoo-in, right? Like, that's a legitimate fight just as well. So if you want to go out there and be a gunner for this team, like, you're gonna have to compete with a Khalil Dorsey. You're gonna have to compete, with a Grant Stewart and things like that. If you want to go out there and be a key special teamer, like, there are some veterans out here that have made their name playing special teams, and that depth is starting to even bleed into that aspect of this team as well. So it's going to be interesting to watch out how the rest of camp plays out. The Lions still have a couple more practices before their Thursday night Hall of Fame game, which is going to be their first preseason game, and it's going to be fun to watch, because like you said, Morgan, I think we are going to see a fair share of our rookies. I hope we do see Tate Ratledge play, because I think if you're still experimenting with him at center, Hall of Fame game, it seems like a really good place to just try it out.
Yeah, and he might get reps there. I did hear it was Graham Glasgow's Twitch. So if you made it to the end of this video, congratulations. It does. Graham did say it sounds like he's going to be at center, which is, at least he didn't seem too sad about it, per Jeremy, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, that's the thing that, like, I think if Graham is going to be fixed at center this year. Like, people are going to be constantly like keeping an eye on, like, is he happy? And I think that's good. Honestly, how happy Graham is at center is probably going to be a week by week thing on who he has to match up against.
True.
As the opposing nose tackle.
And if he can get one of these at the end of the year, I think he'll be happy.
It all makes it worth it, right? So, guys, that's pretty much going to do it for this week's today's training camp observation. If you are looking for any more additional content, like I said, there are a number of things specifically in today's practice that we didn't get to cover. We didn't get to cover 11 on 11s, both in the red zone and just like in regular practice. There's some couple things on special teams that Jeremy and Eric also covered over on Pride of Detroit Direct. So if you want to get that level of insight and analysis as well, I highly suggest that you check out Pride of Detroit Direct. It's well worth the investment. And like always, you can always go over to prideofdetroit.com as well, because obviously Eric writes an article where he kind of details a couple of things as well. Again, not as in-depth as Pride of Detroit Direct, but you can at least get a nice overview of some of the things that took place at practice today as well as Saturday as well. So with all that said, I'm Miko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch. Be sure to hit that subscribe button as well as that notification bell, and we will be sure to see you guys in the next one.